All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2025, number 103, and this is the 500th daily vlog that I have done, if we count daily December. Which I do because I've been making a video every day since daily December 2023, I think. So yeah, 500. That's super cool. I thought about doing something cool, super cool and amazing and something like that. But these past few days I've been doing rants and talking about business stuff, and I just want to do something fun. So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite adventure modules ever. One of the most popular adventure modules that have ever been published for D&D. So popular that it has been reworked 2 times. And each rework of this module has not only gotten better, but has received rave reviews. I'm, of course, talking about Ravenloft. If anyone hasn't seen this little series before, I decided I wanted to talk about kind of classic adventure modules for Dungeons and Dragons that have withstood the test of time, that are still as much fun to run today as they were to run way back when. And a lot of these adventure modules have been reimagined and brought back over and over and over again because they were so good. And I kind of break them down and talk about, well, what can we learn from these things that have withstood the test of time? And today we're talking about Ravenloft. The interesting thing about Ravenloft, compared to the other 2 modules that I talked about, Temple of Elemental Evil was this really big, long adventure module. Keep on the Borderlands was the introductory adventure to D&D. Ravenloft, however, was basically inspired by spite, to be blunt. The adventure itself was written by Tracy and Laura Hickman. If those names sound familiar, they should. They are the authors that created the Dragonlance campaign setting. And that tends to be something that they're a little bit more famous for, because they've been a little bit more heavily involved with each iteration of Dragonlance, whereas Ravenloft, they wrote the first version of it and then returned to Castle Ravenloft in 2006. Didn't have anything to do with them. And like the campaign setting, I don't think they had anything to do with that as well. So they may have created Ravenloft, but Dragonlance is their campaign setting. So anyway, I can't remember which one it was because I have a really hard time with proper nouns. I don't know why. But one of them was playing a D&D adventure, and in it, they had to deal with a vampire, which is a classic D&D monster. But they really didn't like it. It felt weird. It was just in a dungeon randomly, and it was just a combat encounter. And they thought that it was a huge waste because vampires have such an incredible amount of history and lore around them that makes them really interesting and compelling characters. And so Tracy and Laura decided that they were going to write an adventure specifically about a vampire, but this wasn't going to be just some random dude, random monster that they find in the middle of a dungeon. No, this is going to be a classic Dracula-esque vampire. This is going to be someone that is extremely powerful, that is scary, and they were going to set it in a place that D&D games generally weren't set. Again, we're going history here, The original Ravenloft campaign. I have to look this up just to remember the exact. There we go. So the original Ravenloft module was published in 1983. So again, when we look at D&D back in the late 70s and early 80s, the most common type of adventure to play in D&D was the dungeon crawl. You would be given this very large dungeon. There really wouldn't be a lot of premise behind it. It would basically be, well, there's good stuff in there and there's bad things guarding the good stuff. So you need to fight through the bad things to get the good stuff. And that was really all players needed. You know, they would create their characters, they would go, they would kill things, then they'd come out, sell anything they didn't want, keep the things that they did, rinse, repeat. And it was a lot of fun. That's where Tensor and Melf and Mordenkainen, all of those characters started off as player characters going through the Greyhawk dungeon. So Ravenloft was going to be different for a number of reasons. The first of which was this was going to be heavily story-based. Which again, it's not that you couldn't have storytelling in D&D. It's just that a lot of times the pre-written adventure modules were not designed to be heavily story-based. Again, a lot of these adventure modules were designed to effectively be tools that the GM could use to expand their own campaigns, so that they would have pre-made maps and pre-made encounters and things like that they could just throw into a campaign that they were already running. And so intentionally, sometimes a lot of the older adventure modules would be relatively story light. I'm not saying that they didn't have any story, but they were designed to fit into a number of different places. We talked about that when we were talking about the Keep of the Borderlands, where they intentionally left things vague as far as where the keep was located, so that any dungeon master could just insert it into their own campaign setting. Ravenloft was not like that. Ravenloft had a very particular story that it wanted to tell. And one of the things that I think is most important about Ravenloft is the feeling of everything, the tone of everything that you deal with in this adventure module is what makes it so memorable, because it is this huge kind of gothic horror style adventure, and there are things written into it that are specifically designed to give that horror feeling. The idea that you're never safe, the feeling like the world is kind of stacked against you. That's common tropes in horror, but it's not generally something that you see in tabletop RPGs, especially modern tabletop RPGs, where the player characters are meant to be these super powerful hero type characters that are going to eventually save the world. Old school D&D, you weren't quite the superhero style characters, and there were situations like the Tomb of Horrors where things were stacked against you, but for the most part, you were the heroes. And in this one, while yeah, you're the heroes, you are up against someone so much more powerful than you. But let's break down exactly what Ravenloft was, and then we can go back and talk about the things that we want to learn from it. So, the first thing that you get with Ravenloft, I just purchased the PDF. You can get it on the DM's Guild. It's $7, which is really, really nice. In the PDF version, the first thing you get is 2 maps. And this really sets up, like, you can figure out almost the entirety of how Ravenloft is going to go based on just looking at these first 2 maps. The first map is a hex grid based wilderness map, and it is titled Lands of Barovia. For anyone that doesn't know, Ravenloft now is an entire campaign setting, and it's actually been retconned that Ravenloft itself, Ravenloft is the castle that Strahd von Zerovich lives in. That is his castle is Castle Ravenloft. Barovia is the lands that he rules over as the Lord of Barovia. So it was later retconned that Barovia itself is what's called a demiplane of dread, which I believe in 4th edition they actually placed them in parts of the Shadowfell, which is basically this kind of shadow reflection of the prime material plane, whereas the Feywild is this magical reflection of the real world. The Shadowfell is this dark evil reflection of it. So if you look at it that way, and so Ravenloft eventually would be considered its own campaign setting, then its own domain of dread, and now if you look at the modern Curse of Strahd, which is a retelling of this story, it can basically kind of insert itself anywhere. The Barovia domain of dread can actually manifest and kind of take over small portions of a lot of different places, like it's shown up in the Forgotten Realms, and things like that. But back at this time, Ravenloft was its own kind of country, and the unique thing about Ravenloft is bugs check in, but they don't check out. Ravenloft is eternally surrounded by this mist or fog. And as soon as you enter into Ravenloft, or Barovia, there's only 2 ways to get in and out of Barovia. There's a gate on the west, or northwest-ish end of Barovia, and there's a gate on the east of Barovia. And that's it. And when I say gate, I mean these are massive, like 40-foot tall, massive gates. And so what happens when you get into Ravenloft and you get into Barovia is you walk through these gates and then they close behind you. And they won't open again until Strahd is dead. Everywhere else, when you get to the edge of Barovia, there is this fog. And if you try to leave Barovia, you will die. The fog actually gets inside of you, and they have mechanics written into the game that it basically acts as a poison. That if you ever leave Barovia, you have 24 hours before you will just die from this poison. And so that's how the fog keeps everyone here. The second map, and this one I find a lot cooler for a number of reasons, is actually a map of Ravenloft, but it's actually drawn in an isometric fashion. If you're not familiar with the term, isometric basically means instead of looking directly down at the map, which is how most dungeon maps are, the point of view is shifted, so you're looking down at an angle. And the reason that they use an isometric map, I'm assuming here, is because it allows you to see elevations significantly better. And Castle Ravenloft, in and of itself, is a very tall, very large castle. A lot of the floors, like your standard house, your floors are somewhere between about 10 to 12 feet apart. Like that's standard for most buildings in the modern world. Here, a lot of the floors are 30, 40 feet apart from each other. And so this really interesting isometric-based map really allows you to get a good idea of the scale of the castle. The castle itself, when you include the spires and then the kind of underground portions of it, actually goes up to about 360 feet tall. If you're wondering how I just know that, it's because it's on the map here. That's why the map is so cool. So after we get through the map, we actually get to the Ravenloft module itself, and the first thing it talks about is just basically how oppressive the module is supposed to feel. Um, they have an entire section talking about Count Strahd von Zerovich, vampire. He was the first vampire. And they talk, they have an entire page talking about his stat blocks, and then in addition, how he's supposed to play. And one of the most unique things about Strahd is something that, again, really didn't happen in D&D games before this. Strahd is effectively what we refer to now as a recurring villain. What that means is there are supposed to be quite a few different situations where Strahd comes in and physically interacts with the party. But the party doesn't get to just kill him and move on. He will keep showing up over and over and over again. And the way that it's written into the adventure module is he has spies and all these other things around that can figure out when the party is at their weakest, at their most vulnerable, and that's when he strikes. And sometimes he strikes himself, like he shows up and starts trying to slaughter the players. Sometimes he sends wolves or bats or a lot of different things. But it's this constant feeling of you are never safe. Even if you are sleeping in an inn or something, they have encounter tables where every time you sleep, you are attacked by wolves or bats. Every time. There is never a single time that you go to sleep without being attacked. However, if you're in a building, you're somewhat protected, but that doesn't matter. The wolves will attack the windows and things like that, and you roll and see if they can break into the windows, and if they do, guess what? You're no longer safe. You have to deal with this fight, being underpowered and tired from lack of sleep and things like that. Yeah, so I mean, again, creating this kind of larger than life of a villain. Generally, in your dungeon crawls, there might be a big bad end guy in there, but you don't really interact with them that much. They have their little boss room. They stay in their little boss room. Then you go down, you fight them. You might get messages from them, or you might fight like a general of theirs or someone that works for them, but they don't keep coming back. And so Strahd created this very unique encounter that a lot of players were unfamiliar with. The other thing that's kind of unique about Ravenloft is it is the first randomizer. What I mean by that is when you start a Ravenloft game, the second section of the module is called Fortunes of Ravenloft. You are expected to take a standard playing card deck, remove a bunch of cards from it to make it a smaller deck, and then use that to basically predict or randomize what was going to happen. And there were a bunch of different things that could be randomized. First, there are two very, very important items in the adventure that are not necessary to be able to vanquish Strahd, which is the goal of the adventure. The entire adventure, your only goal is to kill Strahd, because you can't leave Ravenloft without killing Strahd. So there are these two items. They are the symbol of, is it the symbol of Ravenkind? Is that what it's called? I know that's what it's called in later adventures. I just can't remember if this is what it's called here. Yeah, the holy symbol of Ravenkind. So, the holy symbol of Ravenkind is exactly that. It's a holy symbol. And if a cleric uses it, they actually can turn undead even better. However, the most useful aspect of it is when it is used in the presence of a vampire, it will project sunlight. Sunlight is the one thing that Strahd and vampires in general have no defense against. Sunlight, way back in first edition, sunlight would actually paralyze vampires, making them significantly easier to kill. And if you could keep them in direct sunlight for 10 turns, they were gone. So, Symbol of Ravenkind, very, very useful. It could only do that sunlight thing once a day, and it would randomly stay emitting sunlight for anywhere between 1 to 10 rounds. So it was a bit of a gamble as far as whether or not it was going to last long enough to actually kill him with just sunlight. But even just having 2 or 3 turns where Strahd couldn't do anything is a huge, huge thing. Because Strahd was not just a vampire. He was an incredibly powerful vampire. He was a 10th level spellcaster and all these other things as well. He was a shapeshifter. He was super, super powerful. The other really important item is an item called the Sun Sword. It has been retconned in later versions to literally be a lightsaber. But in the original Ravenloft, it was basically just a sword that glowed blue in the presence of vampires and would do lots of extra damage to undead and specifically to vampires. And it was actually the sword that his brother Sergei carried with him. The Symbol of Ravenkind and the Sun Sword were the only 2 things that Strahd feared, because the Symbol of Ravenkind could paralyze him and possibly kill him, and the Sun Sword would definitely kill him. So, when you're doing the Fortunes of Ravenloft, the first things that you do is you draw cards to figure out where the Sun Sword and the Symbol of Ravenkind are going to be in Castle Ravenloft, because they're both located in Castle Ravenloft. And so you draw those 2 cards. The third thing that you draw is where Strahd is located. Basically, Strahd gets to move all over Barovia, harassing you and doing that stuff. However, there is one room in the castle that he will always be in. Once the players know this, when they're ready to confront him, they can go to this place that they know he is going to be and confront him there. That's very useful for a character that seems to be able to go anywhere they want to. So you pull cards to figure out where those things are. Then you have Fortunes of Ravenloft modifiers. You do another card pull to find out how being in Ravenloft is going to affect you. And mechanically what it does is it either increases your to-hit chance, it either increases or decreases your to-hit chance, or it either increases or decreases your AC. And again, in first edition AD&D, lower AC was better. So decreasing your AC and increasing your hit chance were good things, and decreasing your hit chance and increasing your AC were bad things. So that's the next thing. And then the final thing that is randomized, you have to pull a card for it, is what Strahd's goal is. Strahd had technically 4 different goals. And this is where things get really, really interesting for this adventure. The first goal that Strahd could have was that he wants a new identity. He is trapped in Barovia. And again, later on, they add more lore and they kind of retcon things to where while Strahd is what's considered a Dark Lord, which means he rules his own domain of dread, the domains of dread are actually kind of double-sided swords. The Dark Lords get to rule this personal domain of dread. However, they can never leave it. It is their own personal prison. And so the first of Strahd's goals is he seeks a new identity. And this is where things get nonsense. Strahd has an at-will ability where he can charm creatures by just looking at them. And so Strahd's goal, if he seeks a new identity, is he gets one of the player characters away from the party, charms him, polymorphs him into a vampire, and then polymorphs himself into the spitting image of the character that he just turned into a vampire. And then he joins your party and tries to leave so that he can go somewhere else to not have to worry about Barovia and all the baggage that he has in Barovia with his brother Sergei and Tatiana and all that sort of stuff. So that in and of itself is devious. Again, your standard dungeon crawl, if you're going through the dungeon, the bad guy's goal is to kill the players. Like, that's all it is. This time, the bad guy's goal is, I want to be the players. Like, that's a nonsense thing. And if it's done well, you can really mess with the players themselves, especially if you have good players. Were I running this adventure, I would, first of all, be running it on Roll20 because I can't go anywhere. And what I would do is when Strahd attempts to take somebody over, it would be done entirely with whisper rolls to the player. And preferably it would happen either at the end of an adventure or end of a session or in between sessions, so that I could sit down with the player and go, hey, guess what? If it worked, guess what? You're Strahd now. So you're going to continue playing that character, but this is your motivation, and this is what you want to do, and this is your new character sheet. But you have to pretend that you were the old character. And just watch the players go nonsense when they realize that they've been playing with Strahd. So that's one of his goals. The second goal is kind of your more generic bad guy stuff. He wants to create a magical sphere of darkness. And this one I think is probably one of the weakest goals because it's effectively just if he makes a magical sphere of darkness, he has more lands to control. So this is your kind of standard megalomaniac idea. And basically, the reason that the characters are there is he needs a black opal. And he believes that the player characters have it. And when he finds out that they don't, he decides to murder them. Again, weak, but it does allow for a lot more uniqueness. The third motivation is the motivation that going forward would be the primary motivator for Strahd in every other version of this adventure, which is Strahd wants to win the love of Irina Koliana. Irina Koliana is the daughter of the Burgermeister, which is the mayor of the town of Barovia. However, she reminds Strahd of his lost love, Tatiana. And so Strahd assumes that Irina is the reincarnation of Tatiana. In later adventures, and I think it's hidden in, it's hinted at in this one as well, though, as I'll mention later on, much like other early AD&D modules, they leave a lot up to interpretation to give DMs a lot of leeway. But basically, in later iterations of Ravenloft, Irina is a reincarnation of Tatiana, so much so that she looks nearly identical to Tatiana, and that's part of the prison of Barovia. Is the idea that it is meant to torture and punish Strahd, and so Tatiana will keep being reincarnated over and over and over again, and Strahd will continually try to win her love, and he will be spurned by her every single time, and so he's constantly in this cycle of rejection. The interesting thing about the Win the Love of Irina Koliana, Strahd comes up with this brilliant plan on how to do that, which is he wants to charm the entire party and force them to attack Irina so that he can ride in and save her, and that will make her love him. It's a classic megalomaniac style idea, and it's just great. The final motivation he can have is he wants the Sun Sword specifically to destroy it. He knows that it can kill him, and it also belonged to his brother that he murdered in order because Tatiana was in love with his brother Sergei. Sergei was much younger than him. Strahd convinced himself that the reason that Tatiana didn't love him was he was old and he was going to die, and Sergei was young. And he's like, well, it's because I'm old. It's not because I'm a creepy dude. Uh, and so what he did is he murders his brother, and the murder of his brother is part of a ritual that gives him eternal life and eternal youth. Unfortunately, it turns him into a vampire. And Tatiana is so upset that she throws herself from the top of Castle Ravenloft, and her body is never recovered. So, the Sun Sword was Sergei's sword, and Strahd was so terrified that he broke it in half. The hilt, he actually gave the hilt and the blade to this character that I can't remember his name, with the intention of having that character destroy them because he needed a very powerful, I think, alchemist to do it. But the character tried to escape Barovia to hopefully give it to someone to kill Strahd. The character dies before he can do it, and so the hilt is recovered by Strahd and is hidden in his castle, but he's never able to find the blade. The interesting thing about this adventure is one of the characters, in order to play this adventure, one character has to be a fighter who uses a longsword. The reason why is they are unknowingly carrying the blade of the Sun Sword with them. That's the weapon that they've just been using this entire time. But because it's not attached to the hilt, it's just a regular old sword. It has just a standard hilt on it, so it just acts as a regular sword. So after you figure all this stuff out, you actually start running the adventure. And the adventure is basically broken up into two parts, thus the two maps. You have the wilderness aspect of it, where you are invited to Barovia by the Burgermeister, and you can kind of interact with all the people of Barovia and find out that the thing's there, and then eventually you make your way to Castle Ravenloft, and that's where the dungeon crawl aspect comes from. However, there is a character in here named Madame Eva. Madame Eva is, well, in here she is referred to as a gypsy. If anyone is unfamiliar, that particular term is extremely offensive. It was it's effectively a racial slur for, I can't remember the group, but they were a nomadic group in Europe. And the term has been used for centuries as an extremely derogatory term for them. So it's no longer used in modern society, but that's what it's referred to here. Eventually, the group that she belongs to is renamed the Vistani. So she is a fortune teller. And I think they might actually be called the Vistani in here too. I can't remember. I read through it very, very quickly. And so what can happen is the player characters can actually come and get their fortune read by Madame Eva. And when that happens, it's actually written into the adventure, actually do a card reading. And basically what happens is the card reading is you basically redrawing the cards. And they have a little box text for each card, so that as she pulls them, you can read, like, if you pull the 7, when you're doing the Fortunes of Ravenloft, you pull the 7. You may find this amid the ruins of a place of supplication. That means the Chapel of Ravenloft. And so, if the characters can get to Madame Eva, which I highly recommend, if you're running this adventure, find a way to steer them. Make the caravan that she belongs to just kind of show up in their path and have them get a reading, because it feels so much more important. And basically what it says in the adventure is, whatever you drew when you started the adventure, throw it away. Whatever Madame Eva pulls up is where everything is located. And so they can use that basically as information to know where they need to go in the castle. So yeah, the first half of the adventure is going around the lands of Barovia and finding out exactly what it is that they're supposed to do here. There's another really important thing in there that I forgot: the Tome of Strahd, which gives his entire backstory and talks about Sergei and Tatiana and all that stuff. Is really really important if you have the Strahd wants to win the love of Irina Koliana motivation for Strahd, because it explains why he's so obsessed with this girl. It also is useful for the Sunsword one too, but that can also just be explained with the idea that the Sunsword can kill him. You don't technically need to know about Sergei to be able to understand the Sunsword one, but in order to understand the Irina one, finding the Tome of Strahd is very very useful. So that's another thing that's randomly hidden in the castle that you pull cards for. So the first half, you just have all of these great little descriptions of different places and what goes on. There are random encounter tables that you did to deal with, because again, that whole oppressive thing about the horror genre in general, there should be constant danger and stuff like that. And then after the party has kind of discovered everything that they need to in order to be able to start dealing with Ravenloft itself, you go to Castle Ravenloft. And that's where the second map comes in, or technically pair of maps, because they're two very tall maps. So Castle Ravenloft is a more standard dungeon delve. You know, it's this very, very large dungeon that you have to kind of go through, and every single room has its own kind of puzzle or encounter that's built into it. But the thing that makes Ravenloft so interesting is, again, your goal when getting to Ravenloft is to kill Strahd. But in order to do that, it is in your best interest to bare minimum get one of the three special items. Either the Sun Sword or the symbol of Ravenkind are very, very useful and almost necessary. Not entirely necessary, but almost necessary to be able to permanently kill him. And the Tome of Strahd gives you so much information on his motivations and other stuff that really makes the adventure interesting. So when the players get in, it's a giant, wide open castle. They can go anywhere they want. They can go into the dungeons below. They can go up to the spires of Ravenloft. They can go anywhere they want. But based on the research and everything that they've done, they will have specific goals that they need to do, and they need to figure out how to reach those particular goals. And that's what makes Ravenloft such an interesting adventure, because you can run it and you can play it dozens of times, and it'll be new each time. Fun fact, when Curse of Strahd was being written, Chris Perkins actually called up Tracy and Laura Hickman and had them come to Seattle to help write Curse of Strahd, which is a retelling of this story that's greatly expanded. And a lot of the new characters and things that show up in Curse of Strahd were created entirely by Tracy and Laura, just right there. But the interesting thing about when Perkins called them up was the fact that Laura and Tracy Hickman run this adventure every Halloween and have been for 30 some odd years. So they've been running it over and over and over again, and because of the randomized nature of it, people never get tired of it. It's just that good. So yeah, the rest of the module here is just describing Castle Ravenloft and the various different rooms and what encounters are in there. And they have some really brilliant stuff in here that became iconic as far as kind of encounters. Like the one that I'm most familiar with was the Brazier Room. I'm just going to read the box text here from the Brazier Room because it really is an iconic encounter. This room is 30 feet square, rising to a 20-foot tall flat ceiling. Gargoyle carvings smile, revealing their teeth from high upon the walls, well lit by a brazier that burns fiercely in the center of the room. From their alcoves in the center of the east and west walls, two iron statues stand saluting with their weapons bared. Each statue has 4 arms, one with a shield, one with a sword, and the remaining 2 with their palms towards the ceiling over their heads. Their eyes seem to watch you as you walk through the room. High overhead, an hourglass with writing on its base hangs suspended above the brazier. All of its sands in all of its sand is in the upper portion, somehow refusing to run down into the bottom. In the center of the room, next to the brazier, is a golden chest. A single door stands in the south wall, while 3 doors line the north wall. Isn't that epic? I won't spoil the encounter itself, but anyone that's read this knows those iron statue things are not going to remain statues very long. And so many of these rooms, the puzzles or the encounters in there have become iconic because they're just so well created and so interesting to be able to mess around with. And if you do have no knowledge going into this what to expect, they will surprise you every single time because it's really well written. At the very end, they have an optional ending. You don't have to use this, but yeah, and now I'm remembering, now that I'm reading it again, the optional ending actually is where they kind of make the link between Irina and Tatiana, where the kind of ghost of Sergei comes back, and as long as Irina's with you, he kind of beckons Irina and goes, Tatiana, it's time for us to leave. And they get to go off and be together in paradise now that Strahd is dead. And then the very end of it is just talking about the Sun Sword, the symbol of Ravenkind, and then the tome of Strahd, and it has the full text for that, and then a few of the monster stat blocks that would not be in the kind of regular monster manual. And that's the entire adventure. Again, a lot of kind of modern eyes. If you go from, especially if you, like me, I've played Curse of Strahd. I've run parts of Curse of Strahd. I know Curse of Strahd really, really well. If you're not familiar with Curse of Strahd, it's a 5th edition adventure. It was the 4th hardcover adventure that was released for D&D 5th edition. As of, 2022, I think it was. Whenever the sales numbers leaked, it was the most popular adventure by far of any 5th edition published adventure. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's just brilliantly written. So if you look at the original Ravenloft compared to Curse of Strahd is not just this little town and then also Castle Ravenloft. It is the entirety of Barovia. It goes into more detail about how Strahd became a vampire. There is the Temple of Amber is this entire place where the dark powers reside. There is the mill where they make the most amazing rolls or muffins or something like that. That if you know, you know, and if you don't, I won't spoil it for you. Then if you go from that to this seems incredibly sparse. And again, the reason behind that was the mindset of dungeon mastering in early Dungeons and Dragons was not that when you picked up a pre-written adventure, it wasn't a quote-unquote pre-written adventure. It was a set of tools that you could add to your own campaign. And so the adventures back then were intentionally written with the idea of, here, we're going to give you the foundation to be able to do a lot of cool things, but we're not going to explain it in so much detail that it forces you to run it in a certain way. Allow your players to run however they want. We are going to give you everything you need to have the world created, and it'll be up to the dungeon master to actually connect the dots. So when we're looking at the things that what can we learn from this amazing adventure, I think the most important thing we can learn from this adventure is just the importance of tone and atmosphere. Right from the beginning of this module, it talks about the tone and the atmosphere of the module, the hopelessness of being in a horror setting, how incredibly overpowered Strahd is, how he should feel incredibly intelligent when the players are dealing with him. He shouldn't feel like some cookie cutter bad guy. He should feel like another player character that is playing against the party, who's just a significantly higher level and has so much more access to resources. Then when you look at all the descriptions drip with gothic themes and this overall tone. And because of that tone and atmosphere, it makes everything work. One of my favorite interviews that I've ever heard, and I was just reminded of this because while I was doing research for this video, I was looking up voice actors and stuff like that. I got reminded of Christina V. If you're not familiar with Christina V, she's a prolific voice actress. She was Sailor Mars in the Viz dub of Sailor Moon, along with like a shit ton of other things. She's the voice of Shantae in the Shantae series. Ever since she's been voiced has been Christina V. But I knew her as Vesper, the Black Hyperforce Ranger. And if you're not familiar with Hyperforce, Power Rangers Hyperforce was an officially licensed Power Rangers Power Rangers live play TTRPG. Now, they didn't use the Power Rangers RPG that we have here because it didn't exist at this point. Malika Lim, who's a game designer and a bunch of other stuff, Malika Lim basically homebrewed a Power Rangers tabletop RPG specifically for it, for this channel called Hyper RPG. I believe it's now referred to just as Hyper, but it's still run by Malika and her husband Zach. And so what happened is I think Zach might have contacted whoever owned, I think Saban Brands owned it at the time, and said, hey, we want to do a live play RPG using the Power Rangers. And they said, okay. And so Power Rangers Hyperforce are officially considered canon in the Power Rangers universe. They even show up in the comics. What ends up happening is they went and they got a bunch of people to play the various Rangers. They got Andre the Black Nerd, who's been a Power Rangers fan for forever. They got Strawberry 17. I can't remember her real name right now. Megan, there we go. Megan, Strawberry 17. They got Christina Vivivi's prolific voice actress. They got Peter Sidarsu, who actually was a Power Ranger. He played the Blue Ninja Steel Ranger, and he became the Red. And then they also got Paul Schreier. Paul Schreier is the actor that portrayed Bulk, who was the one of the bullies of the Power Rangers in the first season of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers back in the 90s. And his character eventually kind of grew over the series and turned into, like, their Bulk and Skull are really well known among the Power Rangers fan base. And so he got all these people together, and because this was officially sanctioned by Power Rangers, they had to make sure that the Power Rangers were following the rules, because this is a tabletop RPG. Anything could happen. And so one of the things that Zach mentioned, because he was interviewed about it quite a few different times. One of the things that Zach mentioned was before they actually ran the game, they had some trial runs. They had some test games to get the players familiar with the system, kind of get them into the idea of Power Rangers. And because they set the tone and the atmosphere of the adventure right from the get-go, one of the things that kind of blew away Zach was the idea, like, we didn't have to tell them, hey, you guys are Power Rangers, so act like it. They just were. You know, these were all people that were somehow connected to Power Rangers, except for Christina. Christina, I don't know if she knew anything about Power Rangers before she started, but she was just a very skilled actress. But Megan was a big Power Rangers fan. Andre was a huge Power Rangers fan. Peter was a Power Ranger. Paul Schreier had been around Power Rangers for years. So they all understood. And because they set the tone and the atmosphere correctly, they just became Power Rangers. When they were given choices, they would make the choices that the Power Rangers would make. They didn't have to worry about them turning into murder hobos or trying to min-max their characters or anything. No, they were Power Rangers. And that's why it's so, to bring it back to the Ravenloft, that's why setting the tone and the atmosphere of an adventure and of a campaign can be so essential, because it will help dictate how the players interact with the world, and can also dictate how the players interact with each other and think about their characters. So yeah, the first thing to learn from Ravenloft is the importance of tone and atmosphere. And if you want to learn something specific about Ravenloft, again, Ravenloft is a gothic horror adventure. And something that you have to understand about the horror genre is the quote-unquote good guys don't win in a horror game or in a horror situation. They survive. The world is not just stacked against them. Their purpose for existing in that world is to die in the worst way possible. And the way you quote-unquote win is simply getting out alive, is just surviving. And so when you look at a horror-style game, that first page where they're talking about Strahd and how he should constantly be harassing and making them feel unsafe the entire time you're there, that is how horror works. If you're going to run a horror campaign, the player characters, not the players themselves, the player characters should feel that they are constantly in danger. They should feel like they are not here to be the heroes. They are here to get out alive. So understand that the atmosphere and the tone is very, very important. And specifically for horror, you should make the player characters feel like their job is to survive, not to win. The second thing that I think is most important to learn from Ravenloft is the Fortunes of Ravenloft system. The idea of creating aspects of the adventure that are modular, that can be moved around without ruining the adventure. It was groundbreaking at the time because, again, every other adventure, and to be perfectly honest, most adventures since do not have this kind of randomization feature built in. This was the first time they did it, and it worked so incredibly well. And the best part about a system like this, where important items are going to be in different places, and the motivations of the bad guy can change, is it incentivizes the players to learn. And that's probably one of the more difficult things for new and experienced dungeon masters to learn, is the idea of how do I encourage my players to learn. If you are too handholdy, if you make it too easy for them to understand, oh, this is the right direction, the players won't investigate anything. They'll just go, oh, well, the DM mentioned this big cave here. I guess that means that that's where we have to go. And especially an adventure like this, where if they start the adventure and they really have no knowledge of Ravenloft whatsoever, they will have no idea about how useful the symbol of Ravenkind is, how useful the Sun Sword is, and so they will have no idea that they should be looking for that. And if you just tell them, yeah, goal is to kill Strahd, he's in Ravenloft, go find him, they might avoid everything and just make a speed run to him, and then end up having their characters all die because they didn't understand what was going on. So by having this kind of randomization aspect in there and having them understand that, hey, guess what? No one can actually know what the goal of this particular module is because I didn't know it until I drew these cards. That in of itself can really encourage them to treat this as more than just, oh, go find the bad guy and kill him. The other thing that's really, really nice about this system is the Madame Eva reading that you can have, because you can kind of, there's a specific spot where Madame Eva is supposed to be. Like, there's a spot on the map where that's where she's supposed to be. However, just because that's where she's supposed to be doesn't mean that she can't show up. And what I have seen some playthroughs do is as soon as they enter Barovia, they will just get this meeting with Madame Eva, and she will do the card reading right there to basically tell them, this is what you have to do. But when you listen to the actual words that she says, they're set in puzzles. Things like, another example, this is in a place of dizzying heights that all loathe to travel. The road winds ever upward, and the rocks themselves live here. Or for the motivation, if Strahd wants to win the love of Irina Koliana, the darkness loves a light and desires it. Great subtle plans are in motion about you. Plans that the dead may find warmth from the living. So not only can the players very quickly understand that there's something really important about this, but it gives the players these very cryptic clues as to, okay, this is what you need to do, but I'm not going to give you everything. You've got to figure out what all this stuff means. That highly incentivizes the players to start investigating, to talk to the townspeople, to talk to the Burgermeister, to get as much information as they can before they go to kick a Castle Ravenloft. So, yeah. Do I think that every single adventure needs to have a tarot reading at the beginning? Absolutely not. But as dungeon masters, you can look at the fortunes of Ravenloft and use that as kind of a guide on how you can give information to your players without just blatantly tell them, okay, this is an item you need, this is an item you need. Like, it's very well written in that aspect, and it can be used in a bunch of different ways. Not entirely tied to the idea of randomizing everything. The final thing that I think we can learn from Ravenloft, and again, one of the reasons I think it has withstood the test of time for so long, is when you read through the actual layout of Castle Ravenloft. Not every single room, but most rooms have something special about them. They will have a puzzle in them, or they will have a trap, or a combat encounter, or something that makes them unique. So that every time the players walk into a new place, in addition to having box text that you can read that can kind of set the tone. They also know that every new room is going to introduce a new challenge. So when you're writing your own adventures, if you want to do a dungeon crawl, or even you just want to have maybe not a full-on like giant dungeon crawl, but you just have them going through a large building or a set of caves or something. All of these things are very common in Dungeons and Dragons. Have something in every single room. It doesn't have to be this massive puzzle that took you 4.5 hours to design, but have something interesting in every single room. Because if they come into a room and they go, yep, this is a 10 by 10 room, and it has a torch on the wall with a door to the north and the door that you just came through to the south. They're not going to feel excited exploring. They're just going to be like, okay, we go through the next door. Give them something. And don't be afraid to put red herrings. One of my favorite stories, I believe this happened in Critical Role. But to be blunt, I have had this happen in my own games. I have seen it happen at other people's tables. It is a really, really common thing. But basically, there was a chair. And if I remember correctly, if anyone actually remembers watching this live, my brain, again, is Swiss cheese. Feel free to iron out any of the things that I'm misremembering. But when they came into the room, Mercer kind of described the room, and he specifically described a chair in there. Now, he was just being descriptive. He didn't mean to do anything. It's just the chair just happened to be there, and he wanted to add a little bit of flavor to it. They spent like an hour trying to figure out exactly what was wrong with this chair because the dungeon master described it specifically. And when the DM describes something specifically, kind of like the idea of Chekhov's gun, if you're not familiar with that, it's a theatrical term. And basically what it means comes from Antonin Chekhov, a famous Russian playwright. And basically what it means is if you describe a gun in the stage directions or something like that, it has to be used within a certain period of time. Otherwise, why did you describe it? That's what Chekhov's gun refers to. Is if you specifically single something out, that means it's special. And if you're going to make it special, you need to use it. So the players were kind of acting on the idea of Chekhov's gun. Well, he described it. It must mean that there's something very special about it. There wasn't. It was just a chair. But that can be a really, and again, so many dungeon masters I know and game masters I know have a chair story where they just decided to add a little bit extra flavor, not intending to put a red herring in. They just were describing something and went, well, this is a cool thing. I want to describe it. And the players just immediately fixated. And it's not always a chair. I had one time, I was actually running an Adventures League module. And just because I described one of the NPCs, who was actually an ally of the players and could actually help them in the adventure, I gave them an accent and kind of mannerisms that the players were not particularly fond of. They spent the entire rest of this adventure absolutely convinced that this guy was the secret bad guy. And every decision that they made was, well, wait a minute. He recommended that we go here. He's obviously the bad guy, so we're going to go this way. And the entire adventure was based on the idea, well, that's the secret bad guy, and anything he does is he's trying to kill us. And it was the most amazing experience I've ever had, because I felt bad for the character. But because I'm like, he's a nice guy. I don't know. What did I do to make you guys think he was evil? I just got into the acting. So, like I said, the final thing is you can learn from Ravenloft. Make every room, every area have something. It doesn't need to be incredibly intricate. It doesn't need to take you 7 years to plan out and have stat blocks and all these other things. It can be as simple as you come into the room and there's a very interesting mirror on the wall or something. But make every room have something in it. Make every room feel important. So that the players always feel like every time they walk to a new area, they're going to be rewarded for that. They're going to get more information. And this is not just true in dungeon delves. Anytime the players are exploring somewhere, if it's a wilderness expedition, if they're walking around the city, anytime they go somewhere, put something there. Reward your players for exploring, because otherwise they simply will stop doing it. If there's no benefit for them exploring and it just wastes their time, then they're going to do other things. But if you're giving them the things, and again, sometimes that is magic items or potions or something like that, but a lot of times it can just be a cool experience, an interesting NPC that they get to have a conversation with, stuff like that. But give them something, because it will make the adventure feel that much more interesting. I don't know if any of you guys have actually done exploring for whatever reason. It was something I used to do when I did the convention circuit, because every time we get to a new hotel or new convention center, we would go exploring and see what we could find. And especially since, again, the way I was able to afford to go to these things was I would run D&D for them. And so I would get free tickets and free room and board. So what that would mean is I would get there before registration even started. So I would always get there generally like half a day to a full day early, and that gave me plenty of time to start looking around and exploring. And if you're actually exploring a real place, there really isn't anything that is boring and pointless. Like walking around a convention center, you will find areas, like even if it's just like a broom closet or something, you're like, oh, that's interesting. So when you're actually exploring, every single area can be memorable. That's how it should be in your games. Every single area, every single room should have something in it. And that also means if every single room has something in it, you can actually use that to your advantage. Once the players get used to the idea that every room has something in it, then you can intentionally put a room that has nothing in it and allow the players to figure out, why is this room different? Why doesn't this room have something? See, by having that contrast, you now have the ability to actually put a room with nothing in it and have it be exciting for the players because it's different. So, anyway, that's going to be all for me today. I'm interested to hear from you guys. First of all, show of hands in the comments. How many people are experienced with some version of Ravenloft? And like I said, Ravenloft has been redone a couple of times. In 2006, they had Return to Castle Ravenloft, which was effectively a retelling of the story, but they expanded upon it slightly. It was written by James Wyatt, who still works for Wizards of the Coast. And it was relatively well received. And then in 2016, I believe, Curse of Strahd came out, and that was, again, it retells the same basic story. You arrive in Barovia, Strahd is here, and you have to vanquish him. But they expanded it immensely. Now it's not just the town of Barovia and Ravenloft. There is a winery that you can go to. There is a place where this group of fallen paladins resides who might be able to help you. There's an entire, the icon of Ravenloft, the icon of the holy icon of the Raven, now has worshippers, an entire group of were-ravens that deal with it. Again, they have the Temple of Amber. which gives you a lot of information about what actually turned Strahd into a vampire and how to vanquish him. Like Curse of Strahd in and of itself is so much bigger than this, but the basic principles of Ravenloft are still there. You still have the Taroka deck reading that decides where the various things are. You still have classic characters like Irina and Van Richten and all these other people in there. You still have Strahd intentionally harassing you the entire campaign. So again, a lot of the stuff that makes Ravenloft started right back here in 1983. So again, how many people here have actually played one of the flavors of Ravenloft? And what are your guys' opinion on Gothic horror style TTRPG stuff in general? Whether it's Ravenloft, whether it's there's not a ton of kind of Gothic horror stuff outside of like the World of Darkness, and that's a very, very different feeling in general. What are your opinions on that kind of thing? Back when I ran the 48-hour D&D marathons for Extra Life for the Critters and Team Human, both years that I ran that, I ran a quote-unquote Ravenloft game that wasn't Ravenloft, it was Castlevania. Fun fact, if you want to see something interesting, go look up the original American box art for Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. It was the second Castlevania game to come out in the NES. And you may notice something that looks kind of familiar if you're familiar with the box art of the original Ravenloft adventure. It's a fun little piece of trivia that'll let you guys figure out. Otherwise, like I said, it's all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.